The next panel is Joshua Breitbart from the People's Production House, Dana Spiegel for NYCwireless, Tim Karr from Free Press, and Chris Keeley from Common Cause.
Good morning. Thank you to the chair, the other members of the committee, and the council and staff who have made this hearing possible. It's a very important issue. I'm glad we're here today. My name is Joshua Breitbart. I'm the policy director of People's Production House. People's Production House provides young people, immigrants, and low-wage workers with a comprehensive education for the information age, combining media production, media literacy, and media policy. We work in public schools and with community organizations in all 5 boroughs. I should also say I'm a Brooklyn native and I watch TV over my rabbit ears. Short of paying for everyone's internet bill, the certification of low-power white spaces devices, WSDs, is the single greatest step that we could take towards closing the digital divide in this country, and it will not cost the taxpayers a dime. It is distressing to me and all of my organization's members that you would oppose this measure, as the draft resolution suggests. The current draft resolution does not even mention the digital divide, although I do appreciate that some of these issues were raised in the opening PowerPoint presentation. This resolution, as currently drafted to discourage certification, would be harmful to the work of People's Production House and to our city. I say this as someone who has been very supportive of this committee in the past. You have done so much to bridge the digital divide, use technology to improve government, strengthen New Yorkers' experience of technology, and boost our local economy, which is, of course, increasingly reliant on technology and telecommunications. However, this draft resolution runs counter to all of those goals. And I should say that I'm just reading briefly through the comments, and my written comments are more extensive. It is sad to see this proposed resolution, which is so filled with fear and confusion. However, just now listening to the representative from the major broadcasters, we just see that the main thing that they have on their side is fear. And in contrast, engineering, the law, the economic health of our city, and the moral imperative of closing the digital divide are all on our side, giving us hope for the success of device-certified access to the white spaces. The proposed resolution is simply bad policy. My written comments contain a full analysis of the resolution, including its factual errors, omissions, and misrepresentations, of which there are many. Members of this committee should ask for references to back up the claims in the resolution before you go on the record supporting them. Since this is a technical issue that can be hard to engage the public on, People's Production House has produced 2 educational videos to explain what white spaces are and why they are important. One is an animated history of our airwaves. It is 3.5 minutes long. The other is a 2-minute examination of the problems immigrants face using prepaid calling cards to call friends and family in other countries, which white space devices would help solve. Abdullah Ba, who's the host of that video, wanted to be here today, but 10 a.m. On a Monday is a challenging time for those of us who aren't, like myself, professional advocates. I have included those movies on a DVD with my written comments. Please watch them and show them to your constituents. They are also available on the internet at our website, www.speakandlisten.net. However, to make this dense issue even more confusing, the committee chair and the council have both assured me personally that this resolution, while asking for the FCC to take its time in making a decision, actually supports white space devices, although cautiously. But I don't see that the resolution says that. Why can't the resolution say nearly the same thing as it now does, but be phrased positively, as in the Council of the City of New York urges the Federal Communications Commission to implement proposed regulatory amendments that would allow portable and fixed devices to operate on the white spaces of the radio spectrum without causing harmful interference to television broadcasters and wireless microphones. It's nearly the same message, but hopeful instead of fearful. We should be excited about what this technology can do for our city, not afraid. Along with my written comments, I'm also including a model resolution, which is much more positive. If you want New York City to be considered a leader in the nation on issues of technology, a visionary for the 21st century, I implore you to consider this alternate resolution. This model resolution is also available on the website, and I look forward to receiving feedback from members of the Broadway League and the nonprofit theater community. However, the current draft resolution sends a message that this city is closed for business in the tech sector. It tells advocates like myself and others here today that if we want to continue our work of trying to bridge the digital divide, we must do it with one wireless hand tied behind our back. To repeat, the current draft resolution does not even mention the digital divide. And even if you decide against our position on this issue, I don't see how you can ignore the 76% of low-income New Yorkers who lack a high-speed internet connection. And again, I know that that is not the general position of this committee based on its past work, but this resolution just runs counter to those past positions. And the Councilmember James asked before about how exactly this would address the digital divide, and I'd be happy to answer that in comments, and there's some of that in my written comments. People's Production House, like all other WSD advocates, wants the FCC to establish rules for certifying devices that can peacefully coexist on the vacant TV channels. The FCC's tests have shown that this is feasible, and everyone agrees that if the devices can't follow the rules, they shouldn't be certified. That's simple enough. But if you want to pass a resolution to that effect, I don't understand why it needs to be framed so negatively. Why not urge the FCC to adopt measures to protect currently unauthorized users of wireless microphone systems while also closing the digital divide and boosting our economy? The worst part of the current draft resolution is that it suggests that we have to choose between wireless microphones and new devices to close the digital divide, when the new technology allows us to have both. If some groups wanted to sacrifice low-income New Yorkers to preserve Broadway, I would oppose them, but I would understand their position. But to sacrifice low-income New Yorkers for no reason at all, as this resolution does, is simply madness. I urge you to vote against this resolution as drafted.
Who wants to go next? Dana?
Thank you for inviting me. My name is Dana Spiegel. I'm the executive director of NYCwireless, a nonprofit here in New York City that uses Wi-Fi technology, which uses unlicensed spectrum to provide free Wi-Fi internet access into a number of public spaces. I'd like to first very briefly address a couple of points that were made by previous panelists here and hopefully ratchet down the hyperbole a bit. I come to you as a technologist first and foremost, a geek, if you will. I'm not a government liaison or any of those other types of people that you're listening to today. I make my money and do my job and volunteer to, building technology first and foremost, not supporting the people that build technology. First of all, there was a comment that was made on a previous panel about the inability for there to be space to operate. I'd like to just point out as an example, I've got a number of wireless devices in my home today. Some use Bluetooth, like this headset right here. Others use Wi-Fi, like this phone right here, and that talks to my Bluetooth headset. And at home I've got a few different Wi-Fi networks. I've also got a number of different Wi-Fi networks from my neighbors, and I've got at least one other device in my home that broadcasts music to my stereo from a central location, to a number of stereos. That's not Wi-Fi based at all, but in fact uses a different type of mesh technology, but still in that tiny little sliver of 2.4 gigahertz that's made available to us by the FCC for unlicensed usage. I have quite a number of devices using otherwise incompatible wireless broadcast technology that all operate seamlessly and without interference. And in fact, all of my neighbors, neither do they experience any interference from the devices that are operating inside of my apartment. This is something that has been brought out as testimony that you cannot have wireless devices that operate together, that when you have one wireless technology using a slice of the spectrum, that you can't have other technologies also using those slices of spectrum, and that's just patently false, because clearly you can, and we all experience this daily. There was a question about, or there was a comment about the inability to coordinate frequency, and I would like to point out that using Wi-Fi technology Just about everyone that installs a home wireless router in their apartments or their houses already does exactly this. They are able to coordinate the usage of the 2.4 gigahertz frequencies with just a click of a button, because that's how easy software is to operate. And so my father, who's a lawyer by trade and not a technologist, can easily make his install and make his Wi-Fi device operate, even though there are other Wi-Fi devices using channels that are operating in the same space that he wants to install his Wi-Fi router for. There was a third comment about this being not an either-or situation, and I patently and firmly believe this. In fact, what you're going to wind up seeing, technologically speaking, is a very slow rollout of wireless technology, such that come the DTV transition, when white spaces are hopefully going to become available for use by wireless technologies, you're going to see a slow rollout, just like we saw with Wi-Fi. It took years upon years. In fact, Wi-Fi was first invented, the precursor to Wi-Fi was invented in 1991, and we didn't build our first Wi-Fi hotspot until 2000. There was another comment made by the Broadway Coalition, I forget by whom, talking about how they spend weeks upon weeks coordinating frequency usage just to launch a show. And I sympathize tremendously with that painful, painful process. But the types of technologies that we're talking about introducing into the devices that make use of Wi-Fi, white space devices are going to be not just far more efficient in their usage of the spectrum, but they will automatically take care of a lot of that coordination. So what would otherwise take 3+ weeks to use and 40 to 70 channels of signal to make use of for just pure plain audio will in the future instead be able to make the same functionality available on only a couple of channels of usage, all automatically configured by the software and the hardware to interoperate within a matter of hours, if not less, instead of weeks on end. So very briefly, I'd like to just present a little bit about the history of Wi-Fi and draw a few parallels to what we hope to see with white spaces. And again, I come to you not to talk about the comments that Shure and other wireless manufacturers have made. Other people on this panel are going to talk a lot more about the technicalities of that. And I'm not going to talk to you about some of the specifics regarding white space devices either, but I wish to solely speak about the value of such white space devices for all of New York City and draw some parallels for the Wi-Fi and its history. And I believe that there are enough similarities that we can actually draw some realistic conclusions about what might actually happen. Wi-Fi uses radio frequency spectrum covered under FCC's Part 15, which allows companies to manufacture and sell certified devices that operate in the 2.4 gigahertz unlicensed frequency range, which allows anyone to purchase these devices and operate them without applying for an official FCC broadcast license. If you use Wi-Fi in your house, office, or park, you are using a Part 15 device. Same goes for Bluetooth headsets that you use with your mobile phones, baby monitors, garage door openers, and some cordless phones, all of which make use of this tiny, tiny little sliver of spectrum and operate perfectly fine and coordinate their interaction without much interference. The precursor to 802.11 technology was invented in '91, and since then has enjoyed tremendous success. You'd be hard-pressed to find a computer user today who hasn't used Wi-Fi at some point. But it was never imagined as such a ubiquitous or widely used technology. It was always originally intended that Wi-Fi devices would be used in large office buildings only, and consumer use was never even considered. In 2000, in New York and a few other cities like Boston and Seattle, technologists started using the Wi-Fi devices to do the unimaginable, share the internet with their neighbors. NYCwireless was founded in 2001 with the pioneering purpose of using this technology to broadcast internet access to local neighborhoods. One of the first public hotspots in the world was in our own Tompkins Square Park. Back then, devices were neither easy to use nor cheap to purchase for consumers. If you had a laptop, you could buy a Wi-Fi card and an access point for a few $100s. But if you went to Tompkins Square Park or Bryant Park, you could do something that no one else in the world could do: sit under a tree and use the internet. Since 2000, New York City has seen dozens of parks lit up by NYC Wireless and others, and each year more parks and public spaces are brought online. And actually, we just installed our second Wi-Fi hotspot in Clinton Hill in Brooklyn. New York City was host to the first ever wireless arts festival called Spectropolis in 2003 and 2004, held right here in City Hall Park. NYC Wireless and others have lit up dozens of affordable housing residences and providing residents the ability to get online and have a critically important lifeline. None of these achievements would have been possible without the FCC enabling free, unlicensed use of the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum range. And I might also add that every single device that makes use of every single Wi-Fi device is 100% certified by the FCC and tested completely for proper operation according to the 2.4 gigahertz usage rules. But even more impressive than these achievements has been the explosion of Wi-Fi usage throughout New York City. Just about every business, both big and small, makes use of Wi-Fi. Cafes, restaurants, bars, and coffee shops offer Wi-Fi to their customers, and a significant percentage of the over 8 million residents of this city use Wi-Fi in their homes. And I bring this up specifically because there have been comments about the number of people that benefit from the use of existing wireless microphone devices and the huge industries that are supported by their use. And that's a very, very important component of the city. But even more important are the hundreds, thousands actually, of businesses that make use of Wi-Fi technology and who would only see benefits from the use of white space devices as well. With all these people using Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, you don't often hear about interference issues. Just about everyone makes use of Wi-Fi in their homes and businesses without issue. Bluetooth headsets work wherever you walk. Baby monitors and cordless phones, devices that use the same tiny sliver 2.4 gigahertz spectrum work just fine too. With all of its success, it's actually surprising that Wi-Fi is in part utterly unlike the types of devices that the FCC is considering for use in white space frequencies. And the biggest difference is that the proposed FCC rules for white space devices ensure that they will not interfere with existing spectrum users and that devices will contain technology to move around the white space spectrum automatically to ensure that they never do interfere. And this is very different from Wi-Fi, where the operator, meaning you or me in our home, have to select the frequency for operation and then tune the device ourselves. And then if there is interference, it's incumbent upon us, the operator, to change this. And so, in fact, the regime that the FCC is talking about implementing right now is very different in that it's far more restrictive in terms of its operation than Wi-Fi is today. In discussing this history of Wi-Fi and highlighting its achievements, I hope to paint a picture for the Council about what white space devices may mean for New York City. Such devices have the possibility of enabling larger scale internet broadcast, providing inexpensive or free access to whole neighborhoods from the central anchor of a park. More buildings will be able to be retrofitted with internet access, a current challenge for a number of old NYCwireless buildings, for example. Schools and libraries will become internet hubs, and in fact some of them already are. Most libraries in New York City provide free Wi-Fi access to visitors. In short, the amazing things that we've done with Wi-Fi will be amplified with the availability of white space devices. The FCC already has proposed white space device rules in place that ensure non-interference. Indeed, New York City and Broadway, who actually make use of Wi-Fi in their theaters to provide internet access to stage and production staff, stand to benefit enormously from white space devices, even while continuing to use their existing technology. Imagine if, instead of just using wireless microphones for audio, we could instead have video performances that could be broadcast across entire neighborhoods, and those entire neighborhoods could participate in such events. This is the promise of the white space devices that are currently being considered for the FCC, in front of the FCC today. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Timothy Karr. I am the campaign director of Free Press. Free Press is a national media reform organization. We have nearly 500,000 members. Of those, there are 17,000 members who live in New York City, and I'm happy to report that many of them are here today. As you may have guessed by now, white spaces is a political issue. But it really boils down... Yes. But it really boils down to this. White spaces is an issue that pits those who have spectrum access and want to keep it for themselves against those who don't and want spectrum to be used to serve other purposes as well. Such purposes such as high-speed internet access, especially for communities that have been bypassed by the incumbents or who simply can't afford access. In the middle of it all is developing technology, which, despite what you have heard from some of the haves in the room today, can and will meet acceptable and certifiable standards of non-interference. The FCC is sorting that out at the moment, as it should, but it's important to understand that politics should not stand in the way of technology, especially technology that could bring vast benefits to so many people. So let's look at the opportunity. Free Press analyzed the 5 boroughs of New York City, and we looked at the available spectrum in this band. We found that after the February 2009 digital transition, there will be 10 vacant channels in New York City for low-power broadband use. That means 20% of the entire TV band will be laying idle. This is amazing, given the usual overcrowding that occurs in heavily populated areas. By contrast, for example, in Juneau, Alaska, they have 74% of similar spectrum available. Still, 20% is a considerable amount. But more important, if we were to limit this spectrum to licensed use, there would be no white spaces for use in New York City, none at all. This is because unlicensed use permits low-power, small devices, such as those being created by engineers at Philips and Motorola. License does not. This is only to underscore an important point. Licensing in New York City means no new broadband providers. Unlicensing this incredible new technology is one of the last best hopes we have to deliver vital broadband services to New Yorkers who need it most. It's important that the City Council not stand in the way of this important innovation for your fellow citizens. As it is written, this resolution is not only unnecessary, but also is possibly a step in the wrong direction. We urge you to ask the FCC to decide in the public's best interest, and that's to open white spaces for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Keeley, and I'm Associate Director of Common Cause New York. Common Cause New York is a nonpartisan, nonprofit citizens lobby and a leading force in the battle for honest and accountable government. In New York State, we have 18,000 members statewide, and many of them here in the city. Right now, we're working on several fronts, including working to increase the diversity of voices and ownership in media, to make media more responsive to the needs of citizens in a democracy, and to protect the editorial independence of public broadcasting. For decades, we have fought to increase access to government and government transparency. The proposal before us today offers a valuable opportunity to consider major development in telecommunications, namely the burgeoning availability of white spaces. Common Cause believes that white spaces hold great potential for increased democratic participation and greater access to government. The Federal Communications Commission proposes that these spaces remain available for public use. Common Cause here in New York and nationally supports this proposal. In recent years, the Internet has provided far greater access by citizens to their government, whether it is through the posting of legislation or regulatory proposals online, web streaming of committee meetings, or the availability of government forms for download. The Internet has brought access to the government decision-making process and its services right to the fingertips of citizens with an Internet connection. White spaces have the potential to unlock a wave of technological innovation that bring more citizens high-speed Internet access. Engineers, designers, and developers would have great incentive to develop new products, thereby facilitating a drastic increase in Internet connectivity, both here in New York City and throughout the state. Instead of having locally installed broadband access or limited-strength municipal wireless networks, the powerful white space frequencies would unleash the Internet connectivity at far greater speeds and easily surmount many physical and economic barriers. Common Cause expects that continued technological innovation will bring more citizens and non-citizens into the technological age and help to bridge the technological gap. Many agencies here in New York State are already harnessing the power of the internet through webcasting and posting of agendas online. With broader access and faster speeds, however, the white spaces would provide the concerned citizens throughout the state, would bring them right into the decision-making process, regardless of economic, physical, or geographic barriers. We expect to be at the forefront in New York City and state in the fight for additional government disclosures being provided online, such as advance notice of public meetings and the web streaming. Freeing the white spaces would broaden any of these benefits by leaps and bounds. Unleashing the white space is good for democratic process in New York and good for the citizens of New York. In recent years, New York City, the members of this committee, and its chair in particular, have drafted and supported forward-thinking proposals to bring the people of New York into the legislative process and decision-making process by harnessing the power of the internet. City agency information is made available for the public to review, and that is largely a credit to the members of this committee. The FCC's proposal would give the valuable efforts of this committee and council a powerful shot in the arm by allowing this additional information to be harnessed by countless additional internet users. Common Cause strongly supports New York's cultural institutions and members of its entertainment industry. We understand the concerns cited in Resolution 1613 regarding this industry. We, like the sponsors of this resolution, do not believe that the twin goals of protecting New York's entertainment industry and freeing the white spaces are incompatible. However, we are concerned that this resolution, in its current form, will encourage those who simply oppose opening up the white spaces to broader public use. We believe that the Council is in a unique position to urge the FCC to take the necessary regulatory steps to ensure that both the broader public interest and the concerns of the entertainment profession in New York City are served by the FCC's proposed regulation. We urge the committee to revise Resolution 1613 to more strongly support the underlying goal of unleashing the power of the white spaces and facilitating broader access to our city, state, and federal government. If there exist technological fixes to the problems the resolution raises, which, judging by today's discussion, it seems is certainly the case, we urge the Council's modified resolution to include specific reference to some of those fixes so that there is no gray area. We know that there are technological ways around this. We know that that these twin goals are not incompatible, and we hope that in a revised resolution we can make specific reference to those sorts of technological fixes. Thank you once again for this opportunity to testify here today, and I look forward to working with the Council on this and other issues in the future.
Thank you very much. All of you have contributed a great deal to the work of this committee, and I appreciate it. And certainly our goal is what you talk about. I just think that what we're up against is a unique situation in terms of the Broadway, and I think that certainly at Common Cause you outlined some of them. But my question is, one of the concerns is, do you believe it is possible with current technology for all of these uses to exist at the same time? I know you say yes, but nobody has what you have in your home in terms of all the devices. But those of us who have some portion of them, multiply that times much more, and will Broadway still, let's just focus on the Broadway issue because that's what the resolution is most concerned about. How do you think we would feel if just one Broadway show had interruption? It's one, I don't really care what I have in terms of interruption at my home, but I care very much about what goes on Broadway. And so I want people to understand we all want what you want, but we do not want any interruption in our most, our maybe only draw to New York City in 2008.
So, I mean, I have a 9-year-old sister who loves Broadway musicals.
We all do.
If I had to go, have Rosh Hashanah dinner with her tonight and tell her that what I did at work today was something that would harm that, I wouldn't be able to look her in the eye. There's no way that People's Production House would advocate for any technology which would disrupt our fellow cultural institutions in the city. So I can tell you that I am 100% confident in the engineers at the FCC and the Federal Communications Commission that they will find a way, or that they could find a way or that they would not let certified devices that would cause interference. I think that the part of the problem right now is that the Broadway users, as when they were at this panel before, said that they're currently unauthorized. And I think that the FCC needs to address that problem as well as finding a way to open up this spectrum. And as I believe I've sent to some of the members of this committee, the Public Interest Spectrum Coalition has submitted a filing with the FCC that proposes what I think is an excellent solution. To the extent, just speaking for myself and my organization, to the extent that beaconing technology or anything along those lines requires any sort of capital outlay to solve that problem, I think that I think the people responsible for that capital outlay should be the wireless microphone manufacturers who have used deceptive advertising over the past few decades to get these unauthorized users to purchase their products. So, and that's something, as I say in my testimony, that I've sent information to staff at the State Attorney General to look at, because I think that they've caused part of this problem, and now what they want is regulatory relief, not any sort of accountability.
So I want to thank you, Councilmember Brewer, for asking that question, because I think it is really important for us to sort of rein in our viewpoint and be very specific about the sorts of things that we're talking about here. I obviously haven't used white space devices firsthand because they're not yet available, but I do trust the technologists that both work at the FCC and work at a number of wireless equipment manufacturers, including Motorola and Microsoft, even though they don't technically manufacture a whole lot of hardware and are mostly known as a software company. I would point out that there are a couple of things that we should be considering when you do ask that question. First of all, the types of uses that we see for existing audio wireless microphones are very limited in their scope and space size. So Times Square is obviously a huge headache in terms of radio spectrum usage, but you step outside of Times Square and those same frequencies are not nearly congested in the same way. So what we're really talking about here are highly constrained, relatively small, though important, parts of the city that have the potential to have some sort of concern about any legislation that the FCC might pass, or rules that the FCC might pass. Same thing goes for places like Madison Square Garden, where such broadcasts are very well contained within the arena itself. We're not, you can't receive a Madison Square Garden audio broadcast from their Shure microphones all the way down in the bottom of Penn Station, or maybe you can in Penn Station, but you certainly can't receive it across town in Grand Central Station. Same thing is true for Shea Stadium and Yankee Stadium and the new stadiums that are being built. You'd be hard-pressed to receive much of the broadcast that they currently use along the highways that pass nearby them, or potentially even the subway that passes by the two Yankee stadiums. And so when you talk about these things, if you can't receive the signal, then a similar broadcast from where you can't receive the signal, if I just if I broadcast in exactly the same way back to those people that were using that frequency, the same would be true for them. They wouldn't really be able to hear, much less have interference from the signals that I was broadcasting. And so if we're talking about relatively low power usage, which is what the folks on Broadway and off-Broadway use, and the folks at all of the other sporting events and arenas use, we're not talking about huge issues across all of Manhattan or New York City or anywhere else. We're talking about highly localized situations here. Some of the suggestions that have already been presented more than handle any additional issues that may crop up. For example, slicing out particular pieces of the white space spectrum for exclusive use by wireless microphone users, which is also actually something that my colleague Josh here just commented upon, will mean that everyone will be able to continue using their existing wireless microphone devices And everyone else will be able to use the other spaces that are not specifically allocated towards that type of usage. In addition, none of this takes into account any of the vastly superior technologies that are already available and are going to become more available. In fact, I give you as an example that same little Bluetooth device that I pointed out before. This little ear headset has intelligent technology called DSSS, distributed spread spectrum signaling, that makes sure that I don't ever have to touch what channel it operates on. It figures it out automatically by coordinating with my phone. And what that means is that even though it's operating on exactly the same frequencies that my Wi-Fi devices are operating on, and any baby monitors that I might be walking nearby operate on, and a cordless phone operates on, it still functions just fine, and it doesn't interfere with other devices, and that's part of the requirements for being a Part 15 device. And I point this out because this is old technology. Bluetooth has been around for a number of years, and the standards have been passed quite a number of years ago. And what we're really talking about in terms of the use of white space devices is much newer technology that does an even better job than the existing excellent job that existing devices make use of.
And what about the television issue, which is also very controversial? Do you feel similarly to sort of the same description that you just gave for the cultural institutions? Are you also saying that there's lots of compatibility? Go ahead, Josh.
Well, unlike Dana, I'm not an engineer, but my understanding of the FCC tests that the devices successfully detected signals far weaker than what a television needs to display. So I have no concerns about their ability to detect viable television signals.
I'm sure there's a disagreement with that, but go ahead. Did you want to comment also?
No, I just wanted to comment on what Josh had just mentioned, which is that sensitivity in detecting in the signal, in the devices that we're talking about here, unlike the viewpoint raised by the folks that were on the previous panel, sensitivity is ultimately a very good thing, and it's respectfully not anyone's job, this council's nor mine, to indicate to a company what sort of device they're going to be able to market. But I can tell you certainly that if you're able to detect signals, for example, TV signals, much more weakly than is really necessary for the type of use that we're talking about here, then I am confident that those hardware manufacturers like Motorola and others are going to be able to successfully not just build devices that are sensitive enough to to make sure that there's no interference, but are also useful and utilitarian for all of the uses that one might expect them to be. So I honestly don't buy that comment that was previously made about, how can you manufacture and market a device that's so sensitive?
Okay. The timing is obviously something that we're concerned about. Some others want it to be along the FCC timetable of a November, December, and then some folks want to postpone it because they feel there's not enough information available. I assume that you feel it should move forward, but what would happen after that, in your opinion? How far are we from implementation? It took a while to get, even though we're now in the hot spot and we have lots of background, and we've certainly done a lot of hotspots in the United States, it took a while to get the Wi-Fi rules promulgated. So what do you think in terms of current FCC timetable, a little bit more time, and how do you think that would either help or hinder what you're advocating?
Well, earlier panelists had indicated correctly, I think, that the process has been long overdue. Certainly, we're hopeful that the FCC will issue an order that will set forth the rules for certification, and we want to make sure that those rules do protect the various interests that are using spectrum. And as usual in the process is once those rules are promulgated, the industry then tries to build devices that meet that certification standard. The other date here, of course, is the February date for the DTV transition. So, you know, I don't foresee, you know, come February 18th, you know, instant flooding of the market with white spaces devices. I expect it will take much longer than that. As obviously, you know, the business side takes quite some time, but the certification process itself will have to be made very clear. So I think it's time for the FCC certainly to decide as to the time when these devices will be made available. There are so many variables in there, both on the market side and on the regulatory side. It's too hard to say.
What do you think the cost of, I know the gentleman who spoke earlier, who's a producer at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, he's always trying, and we all are, to find, as you are, low-cost, affordable access. So there would be obviously wireless networks, white space networks. We don't know what we got some descriptions earlier about what the device might look like or not look like. This is, you know, we're talking, really, nobody but us knows what in the world we're talking about here. But one question is, what would be the cost associated with all of this in terms of access, if anybody knows?
Well, that I think is what is so amazing about this technology and why we're so hopeful about it. As you know better than anybody, from the Diamond Report, we saw that in terms of broadband availability, there's very high availability in the city. 98% have access to cable, 87% have access to DSL, yet only 56% of moderate and high-income households have adopted it, and only 24% of low-income households have adopted it. When we're talking about broadband adoption, what we're talking about is trying to convince people to spend more money. That's what that's a lot of often the problem. Now, we're trying to make that less money or more money, it's still an additional expense that we're trying to convince people to spend. What's amazing about wireless technology is that if you look at cell phone usage, mobile phone usage, the digital divide, I certainly won't say it's erased, but according to the research from the Pew Internet and American Life Project, it's far more equivalent than computer usage and at-home broadband usage. And what we're talking about, and in fact, you know, I can show you the data, but that in fact, in terms of using, you know, non-voice applications, that African Americans and Latinos are actually lead in those areas. You know, seniors who have you know, internet access below 30% still have like 50% use of mobile phones. So what we're talking about with wireless is the ability to deliver those services more cheaply and deliver internet connectivity to people's mobile devices. They would be different devices, but it's something that people have already decided they would spend money on, that they recycle, they buy a new device every 2 or 3 years anyway. If you're like me, I hold on to it for 4 years. Nevertheless, people have decided that it's something they would purchase, something that would pay for. This would save them money and deliver broadband access to the device they're comfortable with right now.
So I think there's really two, thank you. I think there's really at least two different types of price questions that you are alluding to, Councilmember Brewer. The first is the cost for the actual technical devices. That's the headsets and the computer equipment or cards that need to be purchased and installed and whatnot. And I think that we can take a lot of direction and draw a lot of conclusions from a number of different technical timelines for other somewhat similar technology. For example, Wi-Fi, as I mentioned, first was really initially invented back in 1991 and has since, when we started, NYC Wireless started, it would cost, you know, quite a few $100s to buy an access point, and it would cost you a few $100s to buy a card that would provide slow access to wireless signals. Since that time, which is about 7 years, what we've seen are orders of magnitude drops in the cost of the devices themselves as a direct result of the widespread usage and widespread adoption of these devices. So now just about every phone you buy has Wi-Fi and it has Bluetooth, and because of that, the magnitudes of scale drive down prices very significantly. So what I do expect is that perhaps initially white space devices might be a little bit more expensive because they are new technology. Very quickly they're going to drop very significantly in cost such that you won't be able to necessarily purchase a laptop or a handheld device without having it built in. Just like today, you really can't purchase a laptop or handheld device without Wi-Fi or Bluetooth being built in. The second question that you had, the second part of the question is about service and what it's going to cost for us to make use of this new spectrum. And for that, I can also point to the history of NYC Wireless and its use of Wi-Fi technology. It used to be the case that, and a good example of this is Bryant Park, where we needed thousands upon thousands of dollars of Cisco equipment in order to light up the park. And it worked incredibly well, and we've learned a lot since then, and one of the things that we've learned is how to make use of the much less lower cost devices that can offer the same quality of service, in fact, greater quality of service. We just installed a hotspot in Clinton Hill at a nonprofit there, providing Wi-Fi access to a local playground right next to a low-income housing development. The cost of the hardware in its entirety was a few $100s. And this is, again, drops by orders of magnitude in terms of the cost of installing these devices. The biggest cost for getting Fios, for example, that Verizon is incurring right now are the actual street rolls. It's actually hiring someone or contracting out with someone to go out and install the actual fiber and draw it along the streets and run it into the buildings and so on and so forth. And so what we've seen with some of the low-income housing units that we've installed free Wi-Fi into is that we can do this, we can provide a similar level of service in terms of internet access for maybe $1,000 or a couple thousand of dollars for the entire building in terms of equipment and installation cost versus the probably tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars that it might cost Time Warner Cable to do the cable runs and draw out, or Verizon to draw out phone lines to those same locations. And so what we fully expect is that with white space devices, once the hardware comes down to a point where it becomes accessible for most people and widely distributed, that we'll be able to roll out internet service very inexpensively, far more inexpensively than most of the other internet service providers do today.
Thank you very much. That's anything else. I want to thank this panel for working extraordinarily hard to produce testimony and for your support, and we will continue to work together. Thank you very much.